Good evening. A woman is in Dunedin Hospital with severe burns after a fire at Clinton in which 2 of her children died. The family's home was well alight by the time firefighters arrived and was burnt to the ground early this morning. The woman escaped from the blazing house with her youngest child. More on that story in One Network News at 6. Phone links to Central Otago have been out for most of today, but not because of the weather. The problem is right here, outside Television New Zealand studios in Dowling Street in Dunedin. Telecom workers have been repairing a squashed coaxial cable, which was damaged during roadworks by the Dunedin City Council. As well as cutting off Central Otago phones, the problem affected radio-telephone communications and radio broadcasting in Invercargill. In almost any suburb in any New Zealand town, you'll find someone doing up a house. This property in Mosgiel is no exception. The difference with this house is that in another few weeks it won't be here. All the TLC being heaped on it at the moment is to prepare it for an explosion which will rip the interior apart. It's actually going to be used as a set for a drama documentary being filmed by TVNZ. The series is called Indelible Evidence, and this episode's about a parcel of gelignite sent to a woman through the mail. The explosion will be recreated by a special effects expert. If anybody's feeling a little down and lethargic with winter coming on, here's a story to shame you into a bit of action. It's about 2 women, one 66 and the other 69, who are out for a walk. Not just any old walk, though. In spite of the dreadful weather we've been throwing at them, they're intent on covering the length of the country. Allan Baddock caught up with them just north of Dunedin.
It's been said life begins at 40. Watching this pair, you'd have to be a brave soul to predict when it might run out. They come from north of Auckland. They took a train as far south as they could go, and now they're walking back home.
Well, I always wanted to walk New Zealand since I was a child, and I thought of walking it with my dog, but the family decided that Auntie Gladys would be better than taking my dog. Which is quite true. And I thought when she asked me somewhere about October that she'd soon forget it and get over it, and it let me off the hook. But she rang again several times. It was obvious she was going to keep going, and I had to say yes. And my husband thought it wouldn't last that long, so he was very supportive, and he got us on our way. Thought he'd see us in a couple of days, but we've stuck it out for 26 days.
That's something I have to ask you is, how did you get on yesterday in the snow?
We were very cold and wet.
Outram, the road that leads to Outram, because that happened to be a family name, we remembered it. And sleet was falling, and that seemed cold, but not too bad. We hated it.
While we were moving, we didn't matter. As long as we had somewhere to dry up when we got here, that was the main thing.
And we had a warm bed and a lovely meal and a very good friend, and so we recovered again by this morning. We are lucky we can recover so quickly.
They're giving themselves another month to get home. They've got to get back. There are some cows that need shifting.
Dunedin is making a name for itself in the rehabilitation of criminals. The city now has 4 residential rehabilitation centres and won high marks in the Roper report on prison reform for its willingness to treat offenders in the community rather than put them in prison. Tonight, Allan Baddock looks at one centre that's being held up as a model of how the new community care system should work.
Moana House, 9 a.m, the first day back after Easter. The residents and staff gather for their weekly house meeting. This is the standard pattern of life in one of the country's leading rehabilitation centres. No cells, no locks, no prison guards. Just a group of people living together and working through life's little hassles. Like a large student flat, with one major difference. Here there are no boozy parties, no drink, no drugs, and considerably more personal discipline. This time round, one of the newest residents wants to have a girlfriend visit.
What do people think about it?
I just don't know.
How would you feel about some limits put on it about your visit? Like some sort of thing as Tony was doing, no going up the bedroom alone, or no going into another room alone. Because it sounds to me like, it just sounds iffy the way you're talking about it.
It's really about people taking personal responsibility for themselves and their lives, and moving forward from old patterns of behaviour.
This approach is part of what's being called community care. where instead of dumping people in prison, the acknowledged colleges of crime, attempts are made to help them break their bad habits.
And the new sort of word is social integration, where we integrate people back into sort of mainstream community life.
What makes the difference?
Well, the difference is that people come here and the house is based on trust and based on honesty and based on people taking personal responsibility for themselves. So it's not an institution. People are encouraged to do things and assisted with things, but they don't have things done for them. And that's why it works. People have to take responsibility for themselves and their behaviour.
And can people please pick up your filthy coffee cups?
The result of the emphasis on personal discipline is that Moana House largely runs itself. Residents do their own cooking, cleaning and other domestic chores and play a major role in helping and supervising newcomers to the program.
The house works in a series of stages. So the first stage being complete supervision with very little freedom, full involvement in the program. When the person feels ready, moving on to stage 2, whereby they can have more choices about what they do. They can have some time away from the house out of program time to spend time with supportive people or engaged in courses, that kind of thing. And so it goes on until someone gets through to stage 4 and they can graduate.
Yeah, we want to know about all your offending from as young, however young you may have been, you know, when you first started.
11:30, and another prospective resident has shown up for assessment. The course director and 2 residents explore her background and motivation before deciding whether or not she'll fit into the Moana House program.
You've been using IV once a week for about 4 years, is that about right? What are your arms like now?
Doing all right. Haven't used for ages.
No.
She always does that.
Yeah, I does to everybody.
Check.
And do you use anywhere else?
No.
Neck? Feet?
No.
Legs?
No.
So how many weeks is it now since you used a needle?
I haven't used for about 7 weeks.
7 weeks, right, and so that would be...
It's interesting, I think, with Moana House is that even some people who stay here maybe only for 3 or 4 months, they seem to pick up something from within the program, part of their skills training, the psychological work that's done here, and they're able to translate that from the house program into their everyday life. And, you know, that's a tremendous bonus from working with offenders.
And it's a bonus that's expected to grow steadily. Moana House has only been operating for 2.5 years. It's still working to overcome misconceptions that it's just an easy ride for misfits. But with its programs now openly acknowledged as being effective, it seems only a matter of time before the approach spreads to other areas.
It's certainly not a soft option. People have to work incredibly hard to be here and face some really difficult life issues.
But if you're looking at the wider society, New Zealand society, then I think you've really got to say is, why can't this not work? And in the major offending areas like the Auckland metropolitan area, etc., where, you know, that is where a large number of our offending population is, these sorts of programs have got to be working and operating in those areas.
I think we could all do with some of the skills that you're cultivating. And that's our program for tonight. Before we leave you to snuggle up in front of the fire, here's a glimpse of the first big snow around the region. Good night. We'll be back tomorrow.